Hey, this is Kenneth, and today I'm going to show you how to take one 8-foot 2x4 and slice and dice it and put it back together and make your own full-size chair. The design for this came out of Make magazine, issue 27, page 122, and I thought it was really kind of an interesting challenge. Take one 8-foot 2x4, rip it in a couple directions, cross-cut it, do all the crazy woodworking, and you end up with an actually a fairly decent full-size chair for $2 worth of wood. So I've already shown over the last few weeks all these blog posts on how to use each major piece of woodworking equipment. So in this video I'm going to kind of breeze by that and just kind of show you the process to take one 2x4 and cut it up and then put it back together. So please enjoy. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Read through it. And hey, it's been a lot of fun making this. I was originally going to make a couple other things, but unfortunately my winter break has run out as I have no more time. So, watch this, try and learn something from it, and please do not cut your hand off. I'd be very sad if I had anything to do, and I wouldn't be responsible, but I would still somehow feel morally obligated to feel bad for you having cut your hand off being inspired by me. So don't do that. So, hey, enjoy. So I just ripped the short piece, the 32-inch piece, into the 3 chair legs through the table saw with the guard on. Now I've taken the guard off and I've raised the blade. Now I'm going to rip the 4x16-inch piece into slates. You need to appreciate though that I need to rip it vertically, but a 10-inch table saw can't rip all the way through a 3.5-inch 2x4. So I'm going to actually have to do it in 2 passes. One, flip it, and then feed it through again. This is probably by far the most dangerous part of this whole chair operation because we have a large exposed blade, we're missing the guard behind it, and we need to cut a long length of wood. So I'm going to be very careful, and if you see blood, I'm sorry. But I'm going to try really hard to keep all my fingers for you, because I don't think any of us would enjoy that. Get the circuit breaker. So there's the 2x4. You can see it's pretty rough, so we're gonna need. I'll need to join it, plane it, and then we'll cross cut it into the 8 slates, and then we'll have most of the big cutting done. So now, of course, as I cut these, they didn't end up exactly the same length. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to square up one side, and then on the radial arm saw, rip off these little extra pieces so that all 8 pieces will be exactly the same length. So there it is, 8 planks, all the same size. So we now have these 8 planks that I have just ripped on the table saw and then cross-cut to length, so they're all the same length. And then I took the 32-inch piece, ripped it into 3 pieces, and then cross-cut one of them, so these are our front legs and these are our back legs. At this point, we can start drilling the holes for all of the brass screws to assemble them. Before we do that though, at this point we probably want to sand it down a little bit. This wood is obviously all still rough, there's burrs on the ends, and it's generally just easier to sand them before you put it all together, because then you don't have to try and fight all the nooks and crannies that are inherent in a chair. These 2x4s look like they're kind of made out of something like a real soft wood, like fir is a real possibility. So we don't really need to sand them very much. If you're working with a real hardwood, the sanding will be much more important. For this, we're just going to use an 80 grit, which is very rough, and then probably just touch it up a little bit with a 120, which is just a little bit finer. The larger the number, the finer the molecules, the particles on the sandpaper. So 50 grit is very, very rough and will take off lots of material, where 600 grit is very fine. You can barely feel it taking anything off. This is real soft, so we'll just do an 80, pass on 80, and pass on 120. And when you're sanding it, about the only important thing to do is to make sure that you go with the grain. If you go against the grain, you'll just leave a bunch of really kind of nasty scratches, but by going with the grain, you'll actually be smoothing down the wood quite a bit. I have these nice little sanding blocks, because it's got a little screw on the top and you can capture a piece of wood in it. I think I'll probably show you how to make these at some point, but not this year because I'm running out of time. It's already January. So I'll sand these all down. I'll show you how to drill the pilot holes in the planks using the drill press, and then I'll show you how we're going to then do pilot holes in the legs based on these, because it's going to be important to drill pilot holes so that we don't split the wood. So the 8 planks have now been sanded with 80 and then 120 grit sandpaper, so they're nice and smooth now. And we're really close to being ready to assemble this. All we need to do now is do all the pilot holes and countersinking for the wood screws. Normally, you would do this by marking each position, and then you come in with a countersink drill, and you would just drill it right there. But since all of these wood screws are going to be very exposed, I would inevitably get them a little bit off, and that would break symmetry. And when you break the symmetry on all of these screws, the chair is just going to look a little wonky. And so instead of trying to do each one of those by hand, I've instead made this jig. So it's just a piece of plywood with 2 blocks of wood nailed into it at a right angle. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to clamp it in the drill press so that when the planks are put into that corner, this drill is going to be at the right position for where the pilot holes need to be. So instead of using the countersink drill, I just took a 7/64 drill. I'm going to do all the pilot holes at once. So do the first one, flip it over, do the second one, flip it around, third one, flip it over, fourth one. So they're all going to be perfectly symmetric. Then I can come back, take the jig out, put the countersink in, and then countersink on the right side. Is because I need all the countersinks on the same side, but when I flip it, it's going to be I'm going to be drilling from opposite sides. But so clamp this in. I'm going to do all the pilot holes, come back, do all the countersinks with the countersink drill after I finish doing all the pilots, and then I will have all of the boards countersunk, and then we'll be pretty close to putting it all together. We'll just have to countersink. We'll have to pilot hole drill the legs, and then we'll screw it together. Alright, I'll give you the exact measurements for where to put the holes in the blog post below this video. So go down there if you actually want to find the measurements. So all the pilots have been drilled in all 8 boards, and so I've now removed the jig and I've replaced the 7/64 twist drill with the countersink drill, raised the bed, and set the stop to the appropriate depth to get the right countersink on it. So now I'm just going to position each board by hand and come in, and using these pilot holes as the centering reference, countersink all of the boards on one side. So I'll just do that real quick, and then we'll be ready to go over, use these boards to pilot hole drill the legs by hand, and then we'll be able to screw the whole thing together, and we'll be really close to done. I now have all of these pilot holes countersunk, and then I sanded them down a little bit. So now we're ready to start putting the frames together and actually assembling the rest of the chair. So first what we're going to do is we're going to take these two, which are 1/2 inch down and 3/4 of an inch in those 4 places, and then drill it onto the side, these side frames, which make the side of the chair. Now you're going to want to make sure that it's nice and square and everything. So we're first going to make sure that these 2 legs end up being level. So we're just going to place the long leg on top of the short leg, and then using an awl, draw a line. Now we have this real nice line where we'll be able to know exactly where it needs to go to. Like that. Grab my carpenter's square. And then I've got a hand drill with the 7/16 drill bit in it, which I used for the pilots. And so I'll just come in and drill these pilot holes. Get this one nice and squared up. Alright, so there's the pilot holes. So now we'll come back, I'll put some wood glue on it, and we'll screw it in. Alright, your standard Elmer's wood glue. Get some crust off there. So I'm just going to come in and put just a basic bead on this side, and a basic bead on this side. The glue is what's really going to hold the joint. The screws I'm going to primarily are primarily used in furniture to just kind of cinch it all in, so that the glue really gets a nice chance to make a firm joint in there. Alright, we'll kind of get that all lined up like that. Now as far as hardware, what I'm using is I'm using number 8 flathead 1 1/4 screws. These are brass, and then they're slotted on the head. Ideally you would use Phillips, which is the cross, but these are just what I happen to have in stock. And I just picked them because that was the length that went kind of the farthest through everything without actually ever puncturing through the other side. So ideally with slot heads like this you would drive them by hand, but I just took a slot head adapter because I'm lazy and I really don't want to sit here and drive in a bunch of flathead screws. So I'm just going to be really careful as I do this so that I don't destroy the screw head. Yeah, so there it is. So we'll do 3 more in this. Then I'll do the right side of the chair, which is going to be exactly the same but just opposite. Then we'll be ready to start doing the cross planks on the top. So I'll show you that. So I've now got the left and the right frames screwed and glued together. So long chair legs, short chair legs. So this right here is the top and this is the front face. So now I'm going to take one of the forward facing panels and drill pilot holes and then screw it in, and then we'll have enough stability we can pilot and screw in the rest of them as we go from there. I think this first one's not going to be pretty. Right. Alright, so there it is. At this point it looks kind of square enough for government work. So now we can come in, populate the rest of the planks, and we will have a finished chair. Alright, now that we've got the frame put together, we're drilling the pilot holes for these top blocks. The front one was real easy, as I just lined it up, squared it with that, and then drilled the 4 holes. Then what I did was I cut 2 spacer blocks. And so I have these spacer blocks go in here, and I use little pieces of baling wire. The baling wire just goes into the holes and positions it, and then these spacer blocks ensure that all 3 of these are going to be evenly spaced. So I would line these up, and now I come in with the hand drill and drill these 4 pilot holes. So it's important, use spacer blocks when you can, because it's going to give you a much better visual spacing than if you try and measure it by hand. All right. Crap. It wobbles. We can fix that. So, yesterday I finished gluing and screwing the whole chair together. And once I let it dry this morning, I sanded it all down with first 80 grit and then 120 grit paper. So this is real rough paper, but since this is such a soft wood, that's really all you need. Now, at this point, I'm ready to finish the wood. We have lots of different options as far as finishing the wood. You could do a full stain on it. You could go out and just somehow distress it, so like you could leave it out in the weather for a few weeks. But really, I put a lot of effort into picking out a 2x4 with a really nice grain on it. And so I really want to emphasize the grain of the wood more than anything else. Stains on a soft wood like this tend not to work out real well, and they'll end up being blotchy. And so my favorite finish is I actually like to Danish oil it. So what it is it's a real light oil that just kind of darkens the surface of it a little bit, brings out the grain, and really just kind of helps protect it from water and stuff like that. If you wanted to get real fancy, you could put a polyurethane overcoat on top of that, but since I'm just going to leave it with just the Danish oil. So applying the Danish oil is real easy. Just take a rag and the Danish oil, put the oil on the rag, wipe the whole chair down, let it dry for about 15 minutes, put a second coat on to really finish it all up, and that's it. Let it dry overnight, and then you've got yourself a finished chair. So I'll show you what that looks like when we're done. So I've Danish oiled the chair and let it dry, and so now I'm going to prepare the bases for the tack glide. So I picked the smallest, just a 1/16 inch, 1/16 inch drill. I'm going to drill a pilot hole in each center, and then using a block, just hammer it, a block to protect the plastic, just hammer those in, and we'll have a chair. There it is. It's a chair. Seriously though, folks, I had a lot of fun making this chair out of one 8-foot 2x4, and I want to challenge you. Try and make the same chair. Make a different chair. Make something entirely different. Make a bedside table thing, you know. See what you can make with an 8-foot 2x4. See what you can make with a sheet of plywood. Just go to Home Depot and find their construction materials and just be inspired. Be creative. This is what woodworking's all about. This has been Kenneth, giving you a basic introduction to your major equipment of woodworking tools and how to use all of those to make a basic, kind of not very comfortable, but basic chair out of one $2 2x4. So this has been Kenneth. Thanks for watching.